Hello, a Better Lived Life crew. It's Christina, coach, combat vet, and community change agent. And today I wanted to talk about it's a fairly niche topic, but kind of the intersection and a little bit broader of iodine deficiency, ADHD, and veganism. So for those of you that aren't aware, iodine is something we get in our food, and for a long time, it just wasn't a concern here in the US. But recently, iodine deficiency has been on the rise, in part because some of the things that we were supplementing it into to help everybody make sure all Americans were getting enough, we're just not eating anymore. And that would be iodized salt. Most Americans now recognize that salt is not the healthiest thing we can add to our food. So we don't put as much iodized salt into our food. And when you go out to eat at a restaurant, the food might have a lot of salt, but odds are your restaurant's not buying iodized salt. So the amount that the typical American is receiving has decreased substantially over the past few decades. Now, why does this matter? So iodine deficiency, this can lead to conditions like goiter, which is when your thyroid starts swelling because it's trying to get all of the iodine in your body, so it makes itself bigger to get more of the blood flow and all this other stuff through it. And that can actually swell so big and get so big that it puts pressure on your throat, on your air canal, on the blood vessels. It can move down into your chest. Goiters are just not a good thing. Next up is one that a lot of Americans are now blaming for weight gain, and that's hypothyroidism. So that's the condition where the thyroid slows for some reason. There are different versions of this, but basically that's the general gist of it. The thyroid has slowed. This leads to fatigue, weight gain, and sensitivity to cold. Other things that iodine deficiency can influence is infertility, skin issues, hair issues, and confusion. Now, most Americans still get enough iodine, but that's because they mainly get it through dairy products and seafood. So in dairy products, it primarily comes through the feed that they give to the cows. So generally speaking, 1 cup on average tends to have about half of your daily serving of iodine. However, that's not required. So when they do studies, one study found one that had as low as, I think it was around 3% of your daily requirement of iodine. So it can also be an unreliable source, though on average, most dairy has somewhere around 50% in 1 serving. So for meat eaters or vegetarians, it can be still pretty easy to get your daily serving if you are consuming dairy products. Now, the other common source is seafood, because it's very common in kelp and algae and some things like that, where the animals that eat those can build up iodine in their system. So when you eat them, you end up with enough iodine. So where does that leave us now? We know that the typical Americans are consuming less, in part because they're consuming less iodized salt, and part because more Americans are recognizing that they're lactose intolerant as well. So even Americans that are still consuming dairy may not be getting as much of it because they're trying to avoid lactose issues. Additionally, they may be getting less because they're eating out more, etc. So there have been anecdotes for a few years now from individuals with ADHD saying that their symptoms have been reduced when they make sure that their iodine levels are correct. But sadly, there's not actually been a whole lot of studies on this. In fact, when I went looking through Google Scholar, I ran out of studies that even referenced iodine and ADHD and adults on the first page, and almost half of them were all just referencing one of the top studies that I did get. So there were really only 2 that I could find on Google Scholar. So the first was published in the National Library of Medicine. So we've got 89 children with ADHD, And 71.9% of these children ended up testing positive for iodine deficiency at the mild level. And one of the things they found when they studied it was that the level of deficiency did correlate with hyperactivity. So that was interesting because the results were not causal. It was simply a correlation study. So there could be other things going on in there as well. And the study was also a survey study based on the parents' perceptions. So it's not the best. So 89 children, but they did find some sort of link between deficiency and level of symptoms. And then there was a second study from the published same place that found that when they looked at pregnant women and they looked at their iodine intake, like it was a static study, I think it was like around week 22, so still not great. But they were looking at these women and their level of iodine intake. And then they looked at those children after they were born, around the time they reached 8 years old, and whether or not they had been diagnosed for ADHD. What they did find, and I should clarify, this was a study of like tens of thousands because it was a national study. So what they did find was that there was a correlation again between hyperactivity symptoms, ADHD symptoms, in the level of iodine that the mother had consumed during pregnancy. However, this study did find no correlation between ADHD diagnosis. So if this is accurate, because again, it's all on its own here, if accurate, it would mean that ADHD seems to have some sort of relationship to iodine deficiency, but only in symptom severity, not in cause. And that's it. That's it. That's all the studies I could find in Google Scholar. Now, it's possible I missed some in some other journals, but Google Scholar is what I've got access to. So here's why this is important. Okay, standard disclaimer. I forgot to record this originally in the start of the video, so we're going to insert this in there. I am not a doctor. I am not a nutritionist. Make sure that if you have any questions, you go see your doctor. Don't change your diet drastically without doing more research than just some random person's video on YouTube. But I'm just hoping to introduce some concepts to you that you may find beneficial. If you're not eating dairy and you are not, well, just period, if you're not eating dairy, you're at higher risk for iodine deficiency and all these issues. And even if you do eat dairy, there is still a chance you could be iodine deficient, and in which case you might want to just ask your doctor at your next visit, next time they do your annual blood work, ask for a panel and ask them to do your iodine test as well. Actually, I think that was a urine test, but you can ask for it and see if you are deficient or not. Because the one thing you do need to be careful with iodine is iodine actually does have a cap. You don't want to take more than, it's about, I think it's 1,100 something micrograms. Like really, really tiny dosage. So the daily recommended is about 1,500 for normal adults, 1,500 micrograms for normal adults. I'm sorry, not 1,500, 150 micrograms for normal adults. So the 150 to about 1,100 range is kind of your safe range, and you really don't want to exceed that like 1,100 micrograms, like tiny amounts. So it's best if you eat a robust diet, you're not vegan, you're not even vegetarian, you probably don't need to supplement, though depending on how many cereals you eat to other types of healthy food versus seafood and stuff like that, you may still want to consider it. You're probably fine. But for those of us who are not eating these foods that tend to have higher levels of iodine, for whatever reason, we may want to take another look at this and we may want to supplement. Again, supplement at a lower level because you may still be getting some from sources you weren't paying attention to. But to help both with all these general health conditions and potentially help with some of the ADHD symptoms, again, not proven, but an interesting thought. And it generally doesn't hurt if you stick to that middle range. So if you want to start supplementing because you suspect your iodine level is low, a couple of different vegan ways to do this is, first, one of the most common and easiest, safest forms is something like dulce flakes. Tend to have pretty high levels of iodine because they tend to be pulled from the ocean. Very easy, very simple. You generally only need like one good teaspoon. That's it. Again, levels can vary wildly, just like with the milk, depending on the origin of the items. So another source is seaweed. You'll notice, seaweed. You'll notice both of these are from the ocean. Like we said, a lot of iodine is absorbed in ocean plants and animals. Next, you could go for fortified foods. A lot of fortified breads, fortified cereals will have some higher levels of iodine. So you can look for fortified foods. Apparently some tofus might as well, but I haven't seen that myself. Next, you can actually supplement. So this is a food grade iodine. But again, you don't want to take too much. So really follow the directions. This one is 3 drops. That's it per day. And that's 150%. So if you are eating a lot of dairy or something like that, you should absolutely not use a supplement like this. But if you're vegan, especially if you are a vegan who's not the best at staying on top of always eating the healthiest things, like adding the dulce flakes to your meal, you may want to consider something like this on the days that you do not. Next up, you might want to minimize foods that interfere with the absorption of iodine, which can include, let's see, what did we call this? I'd never heard this term before. Goitrogens. No. Goitrogens. That's it. These are a type of compound that are often found in cruciferous vegetables, but the good news is that cooking basically destroys the goitrogens. So if you cook your broccoli, you cook your Brussels sprouts, you'll be fine. You'll get the benefits of the iodine without the goitrogens. And generally speaking, broccoli is more bioavailable, lightly cooked anyway, so you should cook your broccoli. And next, last but not least, avoid things that interfere in more subtle ways. This is chemical contamination. So fluoride, chlorine, and bromide are known to interfere with iodine absorption. Now, chlorine and bromide, I'm not really sure how you'd get those into your diet, so just don't eat weird things. But fluoride, most of us live in areas with fluoridated water in the US, so you may need to consider that. I actually plan to get a water filtration system installed because in addition to this, which I just found out about, my other condition, my genetic condition, it turns out that when your body is trying to make collagen and it's trying to absorb certain things, it needs to do that. Fluoride also interferes with that. And since I already have problems with that, I want to get the fluoride out of my water so that my body has the best chances of making good collagen. So I'll be doing that here pretty soon, but that will help both with the iodine absorption and the collagen production. Now, again, this is very preliminary. The studies are not good, but given the potential negatives and the potential negatives of not getting enough iodine and the limited risks of getting iodine, especially if you stay under that cap of about 1100 micrograms, if you stay in that range, there just doesn't seem to be a big downside to it. So you might want to try it. Maybe it helps with your symptoms, maybe not. We're learning a lot about nutrient deficiencies and their effects on ADHD. So take your multivitamin, take anything you think you might be deficient in, well, within reason. Maybe you see a doctor first. And good luck. So If you like this, got anything out of it, hit like and subscribe, share it with a friend or family member who is maybe looking for some way to help be a better vegan or help with their ADHD. And go forth and do great things.